when you're activated. Be aware of the stories that are coming online. Just pause and listen to that little voice because they may not all be the truth. They will feel familiar, but they're probably not the truth. And even in your everyday, just like with the wine glasses example, just dial up your own level of self-awareness and inquiry around what stories am I telling myself? Like what information am I inserting in the blanks to create a story? And how accurate is that? Because we run the risk of coming to conclusions which we're very sure about. This definitely happened. But how much of it are we actually unconsciously conjuring up in our heads? And it's a real risk in relationships, at work, at home, everywhere, where we get very sure of our own stories and we're filling in the blanks, we're joining the dots, but the stories aren't necessarily the truth. Welcome to Limitless, the podcast for cycle breakers, change makers, and conscious leaders who are done performing, proving, and pleasing and are ready to live, lead, and create from deep alignment. I'm your host, Fiona Walsh. Every 2 weeks, I hold space for real soul-expanding conversations with guests who are still in it. They're navigating their biggest fears, shedding old identities, letting go of patterns that no longer serve them, and rising into their limitless potential. Together, we share what it's really like to be human, messy, raw, imperfect, and learning to own every part of ourselves, even the ones we've tried to keep neatly tucked away. We go deep into the work of coming home to yourself, getting out of your head, feeling safe in your body, letting go of old stories, and creating a life that's true to who you really are. Subscribing to Limitless is the best way to make sure you never miss an episode. So hit pause and tap follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Because this isn't about doing more. It's actually about remembering who you are. And that's what makes you limitless. Welcome to Limitless. This week is a solo episode. And I wanted to give you guys an update on a little bit about me and where life is at the moment. And some of the work that I have been working through myself, the inner work that impacts my outer world. And I've also been sharing some of this with my clients. But we're in it right now. I'm going to be like straight up with you guys. And I've got one child sick home from school who we're not really sure with her. She's got some nasty winter virus. I'm solo parenting. And I've got another child, my other twin, who has a broken leg. And she had a ski accident on the very first ski of the season in the second week of January. She twisted her leg Friday after school and she has a spiral fracture of her tibia of her right leg. And wow, it's interesting having a child on crutches to really give you some perspective on life. And also it's really brought up some patterns and some interesting loops in my inner world that I want to share with you guys today. One of the things that's been really, really challenging with getting her, one was to get her onto crutches. So before we found out that before we got an x-ray, she was given crutches by the urgent care clinic here. And she brought them home and she was not confident on them and she slipped in our hallway. And this was before her broken leg was also cast. So I can't even fathom how scary and painful that would have been for her. She's only 7. So she got it cast the next day, but then was very, very hesitant to use the crutches. And this is just inside our house. And we had just been carrying her around because she's as light as a feather. But we needed her to get onto her crutches so she could be mobile and have some independence and start to get back into moving around on her own and then back to school as well. And so she was very resistant for a couple of days and it brought out some very familiar patterns in me, which I'm going to talk about. And as anyone knows, if you've got a strong-willed child, the more you're trying to get them to do something, the more they're likely to resist. So it was just like, it was not a war to be won. Let's just say that. The other thing that's been really like just interesting that has come through while she has been navigating how to use crutches and get confident and comfortable on crutches is that we are in the thick of Vancouver winter. And last week, the weather when she was in her first week of crutches, it was like what they call atmospheric rivers and rain here. So like insane amounts of rain. Her school and where we live, we're right on the edge of a forest. So there are gravel paths into school. There's not even like footpaths or sidewalks everywhere. Water streaming down like a water feature, moving gravel, moving leaves. Like if you're a first time on crutches, completely gnarly conditions, which didn't help with her confidence. And then this week, the rain has stopped and we're all very grateful because it's beautiful, blue, clear skies, sunny days, but it's freezing. And so it's like 1-2 degrees overnight, which means in the mornings and into places that are in the shade all day, there is a thin layer of ice everywhere. So I feel like we thought week 1 was hard on crutches. Week 2, the degree of difficulty has notched up. Someone is like dialing up the how much can she take on these crutches. And so it's just been interesting that these external things that have been going on, that have been challenges for Harry and then challenges for us as her parents, has really stirred up something familiar inside of me. And it's really not actually, if I think about it, about the parenting stress or the change of logistics, because we did have to cancel an entire term 2 of activities and everything. We've had to adapt drop-offs, pickups, things at school, everything after school. Our entire ski season has been changed in one crash because we can't all go up together. Someone has to stay home with her. So there's been a lot of logistical changes. There's been a lot of additional things added to our plate. A lot of stress. But it's interesting because the patterning inside of me that showed up is not new. And it's a loop that I know very, very well. And it's one actually that has become more and more apparent to me, in particular in the last month. And part of it was because I did a 4-day immersion at the start of or early December. And so I really focused or got some new self-awareness around this pattern. And then out of that immersion, we had another incident happen, which was interesting. So we had been deliberating about whether or not we go away at Christmas. And I really wanted to go away and have a break. It's in my coaching business, it's when all of my clients tend to take a break. So it's a guaranteed 2-week break usually for me in my business. And I wasn't feeling burnt out or anything like that, which is great. That's a credit to the nervous system work I've done because in corporate, it was like a crawl to the line to get to Christmas to have a break and always feeling really over it and burnt out by the end of the year. I wasn't feeling like that, but I really did feel like I wanted a break. And for me, a break means going away. I don't do staycations. That's not my jam. I know some people love them. I like to go when I have a break, I like to go to a new environment. I like to go where the temperature feels different. And so we were planning, what we were deliberating with was, should we go to California? Because we did a road trip to there last Christmas, the year before. And we had finally made the decision to go. And we woke up, we were already in packing mode and we had 2 days left of school. It was 2 days before we left for the trip. And we woke up in the morning we live on a 3-level townhouse and our middle level is our main living floor. We woke up to water dripping and fast dripping, not little drips, through 3 spots in the ceiling onto the floor. So we pretty much woke up to like a water feature in our main lounge room floor. I'm laughing now. It wasn't at the time. And we had to go into damage control mode. It was like 5:55 a.m. and we've got buckets and towels and we're like squeezing the roof, trying to get the water out because the roof hadn't collapsed or anything. Like, it wasn't that bad. What backstory is that the tap upstairs in our bath had a slow leak throughout the night. And so it had filled part of the ceiling on the floor below. And in that moment at 5:55 a.m., I am actually like, when something needs to go into action stations, I'm the kind of person you want around. I'm like, got the towels and I'm like, we've got this, and my other half and I like cleaning it up. We're trying to figure out what to do. And we're like looking up dehumidifiers and heaters and all these things to like fix the problem of the leak. My other half was able to work out where the leak was coming from. So he was able to stop that. But then we had lots of other things to solve around, like, do we need to get a plumber out? How do we dry the ceiling, which is now wet? And the bigger question that came up was like, do we go on a holiday or not? Because we don't have an active leak, but we've got an active wet roof, ceiling, floor in the bathroom, which we didn't want to end up with a mold problem. And so in action mode, when I was like trying to solve this problem, I was like excelling. I was all in. It was all good. And I was like, this is fine. We'll get it done. Everything's going to be great. But the stress didn't come from the leak or from solving the problem of the water in the roof. The stress arrived when I got out of problem solving fix it mode and I started thinking about me and making it about me. So like, why is this happening now? These are the thoughts in my head. This is a little voice. And you guys know I have done a lot of inner critic work. I use it in all my coaching containers, but this still occurs because I'm human. Why is this happening now? I'm exhausted. This was when we're supposed to go away. We can't cancel this trip. I need a break. This has to happen. And then also to my other half, like, why is he sitting there thinking, why isn't he called a plumber? Is he moving fast enough? We should be moving faster. These are all of the overwhelm. This is the flooding of thoughts like into my head. And as I said before, the ceiling wasn't the problem. It was when I started to make an external problem internal to me, and the story that I made it mean, the stories I just was sharing with you, that it started to feel very overwhelming and a bigger and bigger problem. And even though I've been doing this work on myself and with clients for quite a long time now, it's really interesting because in the moment when we're activated like this, and this is because the activation was more not when I was in action mode, it was more when I started to think about, oh my God, what ifs and should haves and all those things, was I'm trying to make meaning of a situation. My mind is going into pattern recognition. We're trying to make sense of what we can do, what it means for me. And in that moment, the stories that come through are stories that are based on past memories, past experiences, past emotions. So they feel very true and they feel really familiar, but they're just stories. Like the whole, why is this happening to me? This always happens to me. I need a break. I mean, I sound very pretentious and self-centered, but like I was desperate for a break. I was really looking forward to going away, but I was making this problem in the ceiling about me and my break and what I needed in that moment. And it's really, really interesting because I'm going to like take you back another step, which is a couple of weeks before the water leak. And when I was in this 4-day immersion, we learned so much stuff, and I'm only touching on the slightest slither today. And I will be sharing more of this as I go through it over the next 12 to 18 months. However, we did talk a lot about these stories that we tell ourselves in the moment when we're trying to make sense of something that's going on, or while we're trying to join the patterns or make meaning of why did this happen to me? And I know some people believe in everything happens for a reason. Well, that's also a sense-making lie because, well, what was the reason and what's the silver lining and that sort of, and I have been down that rabbit hole many times. However, I'm now seeing I'm taking a slightly different approach, which is instead of looking for those answers, being curious about the stories that I tell myself in that moment. And so one of the cool exercises that we did in the immersion was demonstrated to us just how quickly the mind creates story from pieces of information or fragments, and how we are on autopilot a lot of the time while we're doing this. So we may not even be we're not consciously aware of it. And I'm going to take you through it now. I'm just going to go for it because I think it's the best way to give you an example of how our brains take fragments of a situation, of a story, and then start to join all the dots. And it's not always to create a truthful story. It's just doing what it does because it's trying to solve a problem. It's trying to fill the dots. It's trying to make sense. So if you're in a place where you can like shut down your eyes, you're not driving or you're not out for a walk, I'd invite you to close your eyes it's going to be just for a minute or two. Okay. I want you to imagine, take a few deep breaths actually with me. Breathing in and out. Ground your feet on the floor. Just notice how your body feels. Just taking an intentional breath in and hold at the top and let it go. Beautiful. Okay, great. I want you to imagine that you walk into somebody's home. You open the front door and you step inside. It's quiet. There's some soft music playing in the background. You listen into that. There's a candle lit on the table. It's flickering gently. The room is really cozy and warm. You look around and you notice on the coffee table there's 2 wine glasses. One is empty and one has probably about half a glass of wine left in it. You notice there's no one else in the room, just stillness. Okay, great. Invite you to open your eyes. What just came up for you when we went through that and we painted a visual image of that room? Who was there? What had happened? What did you conjure up in your mind? What stories did you start to create to join the dots of what I shared with you? Were there people there? Why were there 2 wine glasses but no people there? Now, when we did this exercise in the immersion, the group was bigger than 20 people, and some people shared, but I'm sure there were 20 different stories of what happened. We were given exactly the same details, but we all had completely different interpretations of what had happened, because that's what our minds do. Some people had interpreted that there are 2 people like off in another room getting it on. My mind was like, oh my God, they had a massive fight and they've gone to different rooms. Like so many different interpretations. We fill in the blanks when we don't have all the information. And how we fill in the blanks is by going into our own past memories, our own past experiences. And we draw on those to fill in the blanks. So we're not reacting to the facts of our lives, but we are reacting to the stories we've unconsciously attached to them. Now, it's really fascinating as you start to become aware of this because you do it all the time. We're on autopilot, joining dots, pattern recognition all the time, which means we're quite often misinterpreting things or looking at things through our own perspective, and it's not actually true. Now, this goes back to Harry's injury, where I found myself last week, and she didn't want to use her crutches, and we tried everything. We watched YouTube videos of kids on crutches. We built an obstacle course where she got candy and stickers along the way. We tried to make it fun. Like, we did everything. But the reality was she didn't feel ready to use them. She was still really scared because she'd fallen over on the Sunday night. But my body and the survival mechanism in my brain was saying, if she doesn't get on these crutches, she's not going back to school. If she's not going back to school, I can't work because I'm on mum mode. And if I can't work, I'm falling behind. I've already fallen behind. Everything's slipping. Oh my God, I'm dropping the ball. This is stressful, stressful, stressful. This is the looping. And I realized that I'd stopped responding to her injury and her needs. And I had started to make it about me, about my capacity, about my worth, my ability, my work. And it's really interesting because we learnt about paradoxes and problems in the immersion. And a paradox is something that a problem is able to be solved. There's like a known solution, just like the water's leaking from the ceiling. We need to stop the leak. We need to dry out the roof, like maybe get the roof replaced. They're all problems. The paradox was when I started to make about me and my trip and what's happening and does it happen to me. With Harriet, the paradox was around the tug of war in many ways around I couldn't get her to use the crutches. And so I was becoming more stressed around I need her to use them. And if she's not using them, I found this whole looping. You might actually have had it. If you ever had a troubles falling to sleep at night or in the middle of the night when you wake up, and the more you try to go back to sleep, the more awake you feel. Or when you're in a meditation, if you're actively trying to stop the thoughts coming in your head and they just keep coming, these are paradoxes. It's when you're trying to solve something and you're actually making it worse. And the harder you do it, the more stuck you get. And you can't force your way out of it. It doesn't work because it's a loop and you're never going to solve it. It is not a problem. It is a paradox. So for me, the paradox that I learned about in this immersion, which played out beautifully in the ceiling leak, and again last week with Harriet, was around control. I like to control things. So when things start to feel out of control, I try to micromanage. I'm trying to fix everything. I try and take over. I'm scanning for risks. I try and hold everything together because I don't want it to fall apart, because if it does, I lose control. So my nervous system learned when I was very little that control equals safety. And so here's my paradox that I'm stuck in, that I'm looping in. The more I try to control, the more I feel out of control. If I start to tighten the grip, the less grounded I am. And it's really, really fascinating because it played out beautifully with the leak, the looping around. I was totally fine when we were in problem solving fix-it mode. Absolutely fine. When I got into the paradox and the looping and made it about me, about self, I started to blame the leak on Jules. And this is not working. And it was awful. And same with Harriet last week. As she resisted more, we were trying harder to get her to do it. And Jesus, the resistance was just building. We were not getting any closer to a resolution. We were just entangled in each other's loops of control. And I think what's the most interesting thing is that most of us are living with these loops every single day. I see it in every one of my coaching clients. I do it myself. I see it in my partner. I see it in my kids. It's part of being human. We get in these mechanisms of survival, which are loops, and we're stuck in them. And one of the key things to do as a first step is to really stop and pause like I've been doing and be like, what stories am I telling myself about this? How am I making this about me to protect me? What feels familiar in the moment? Is this true or is it just familiar? Because when we can have this level of self-inquiry and self-awareness, you start to see the loop rather than being in the loop. And this is the work that I am focused on right now. It is so challenging, but it's so rewarding at the same time. And It is each time I have life throw me something, a challenge like we've had in the last few weeks, I'm still falling into the loop, but I'm starting to be able to have a different level of perspective afterwards. I'm like, oh gosh, that's what I was doing. And what did I tell myself in the moment? And what am I learning about myself and these stories that are not the truth, but they feel very familiar because I've been telling myself these stories since I was a little kid. And so my encouragement to everybody listening is when you're activated, be aware of the stories that are coming online. Just pause and listen to that little voice because they may not all be the truth. They will feel familiar, but they're probably not the truth. And even in your everyday, just like with the wine glasses example, just dial up your own level of self-awareness and inquiry around what stories am I telling myself? Like what information am I inserting in the blanks to create a story? And how accurate is that? Because we run the risk of coming to conclusions which we're very sure about. This definitely happened. But how much of it are we actually unconsciously conjuring up in our heads? And it's a real risk in relationships, at work, at home, everywhere, where we get very sure of our own stories and we're filling in the blanks, we're joining the dots, but the stories aren't necessarily the truth. And so I encourage you just to sit with this a little bit. Maybe notice, oh, when did I do this? When I shared this with my other half, he went out for a bike ride, a mountain bike ride. He saw a neighbor hiking and someone else was walking towards him and in the dark. He came back and shared this whole story with me about what he thought happened. And then when we saw the neighbor later, she told us what had happened. And it was like an entirely different story. And so we were both like, whoa, this is it in real time. We are constantly conjuring up stories, joining the dots, making sense based on our past experiences. And a lot of the time, it's not accurate. So I just encourage everyone who's listening today just to pause and go within and ask yourself, what stories are buzzing in my head right now? What am I telling myself right now about this? And is it really the truth or is it just familiar? And if it's familiar, it's probably a story based on your past and it may not be the truth. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this slightly different episode. I am planning to share more of these throughout 2026, where I dig in a little bit more into some of the work that I'm doing with myself or with my clients. And hopefully it gives you guys some new perspective, some new insight, some new self-awareness, and some new self-inquiry so that you can start to unlock your limitless potential over the course of the year. Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in to Limitless. If you enjoyed today's episode and love hearing the stories of courageous cycle breakers, I'd be grateful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your feedback not only helps others discover the show, but it also amplifies our mission to unlock emotional freedom and true potential. Every review makes a difference in helping more people embrace their limitless life.